Nikki, and welcome back to Live a Little, your cosy corner of the internet that is equal parts unfiltered, equal parts messy, and equal parts bestie. So, for today's pod, I wanted to talk about my chronic illness, which is super fun, but I wanted to talk about how I think sometimes people romanticize struggle, especially in an age of social media and how, everything is inspirational and everything is about your healing journey. And I feel like every day there's a new trend about recently there's been this trend that's like, people think I don't know ball. And then you swipe and it's a photo of you like struggling or crying. And then it's like this sad music. And then people being like, but I know ball. And so I feel like there is constantly some sort of trend or something about people slightly romanticizing their struggles or romanticizing your struggles. I feel like it is as old as time. When I got diagnosed with my condition, I would watch like teen rom-coms where two teenagers fall in love in hospital when they've both, got cancer or got an illness. And you're like, this is just not realistic at all. This is not how it is at all. You don't speak to the other children around you because you're both too sick. You don't see them. There's no interaction at all. It just isn't how it's perceived. And I think sometimes then chronic illness or like chronic struggles all get painted with the same brush of being, just slightly romanticized and slightly kind of character building. And like they are, these inspiring journeys you go on and come out stronger for. And I just don't think, I think that mindset can be quite toxic. And I think especially chronic illness is something that really only you can understand yourself. It's a bit more of a niche experience than say like, I don't know, your parents splitting up or going through a breakup or whatever that may be. It's a lot more niche. And I really struggled with that, especially when I was in school and really interacting with other people my age. There was nothing that I could relate to. I, for a bit of a background, have an illness called AVM and was diagnosed with it at 6 years old. Till 6 years old, this side looked like this side. I never knew I had my condition. I was born with it, but it didn't become active till I was 6. And so I knew no different. And I was like every other child. And I didn't know what chronic illness was. And then suddenly it became my whole universe. It was, constant hospital appointments, operations, scans, everything in my life became surrounded by it. I had to stop all of my hobbies. I rarely got to school. I rarely saw people my own age. And so, everything I knew basically flipped upside down in an instant. And to this day, I'm now 21. I've had 98 operations. So nearly at the 100 mark. Someone throw me a party. No, I don't want a party. But, I feel like if you don't make light of it, you will cry. So maybe I should have a party when I hit number 100. I used to this is really morbid, but like when I was younger, I used to collect the hospital wristbands, that they put on you when you've had a surgery or you're admitted to hospital. And then suddenly like it got to this point where there was so many wristbands. I was like, this is actually not giving. And this is actually really sad. And it was like my version of having a medal or a token, but it was just a really depressing token of like, and another one, cross off another one, thank you. But not in a way that you would like it. And I really, I've went from being 6 years old to like an adult very, very, very quickly. And with that, there was just a real detachment to not even just people my age, but just the people around me, the world. I felt very detached and like my struggles were so big that I really struggled to feel connected to reality and connected to just little things or little struggles. And, I think people with the work that I do see this smiley, resilient side of me. And that is real, and I've shared the hard sides too. I've done videos like a day in a life, come with me to hospital when I'm about to have an operation. And I've had 2 documentaries I've created about my life that quite literally followed the hardest parts of my life. However, day to day, I'm not sharing the hard parts. Social media ultimately, as real as we think we're being, is a highlights reel still of our life, because I don't know, when I'm going through a really tough day, the last thing I'm thinking is to press record on my camera. There's times where I think, okay, maybe this would be beneficial to film, but I'm not. It's the last thing that I'm prioritizing. I'm just trying to literally get through the day. And so sometimes I feel like people do, I guess romanticize is maybe the wrong word, but like glamorize or soften someone's story or their struggles to make it more comfortable to live with, or to relay the story in a way that feels less uncomfortable for other people. I feel like I've spent so much of my life kind of changing the narrative of certain things that have happened to me, or like not making them seem as bad as they genuinely were, to try and preserve other people's feelings, because I think a lot of the time people just don't know how to react to things. And that's not anyone making me feel that way, but I think sometimes when I have had caught people off guard where they've been like, "How are you?" And I've said, "You know what? I'm actually having a really shit time and it's terrible, and this, that, and the other of why that is." And then you kind of are met with the like panic of them not knowing how to react. I've had that one too many times. I think I just now always sort of soften or play down things I'm going through, or just how bad things were, to not seem as brutal for other people, because I don't want it to impact them in a way where they just then don't know where to kind of go from there. And there's a distinctive kind of example where I felt like other people just have not understood quite how bad things were for me. Like when I was younger, I had 9 operations at a like world-renowned hospital in the UK, and then my condition, kind of just kept deteriorating and getting worse and worse. And so it got to a point where basically every doctor in the UK had kind of washed their hands with me and said, "There's no more we can offer you. There's nothing else we can do." And that was so difficult, because it's like, if the doctors, the people who are ultimately like the superheroes in your story, can't even help you, then you are so helpless. No one can help you. And it was a very, very dark time. And ultimately, my parents and I ended up having to start going to America for medical treatment for me, because it was the only other option. And these were treatments that, my parents had to pay for out of their own savings, and they were not cheap at all. And it was just a very particularly dark time over the whole course of me having my condition and being aware that I had my condition and it affecting me. And I think I was like 8 or 9 years old when I started going to America. I would go to Denver, which is in Colorado. This is when I realized I completely get children just don't have an understanding of like illness and hardship unless they are, like I was, like actively going through something. But I was going to America for treatment, and it was my first time I was going, and my class kind of clubbed together to write personal messages to me, as kind of like a send off, good luck booklet. And they knew that I was going for treatment, and they knew, as much as they could, or as much as I kind of wanted them to know, which was I was going for treatment. I wasn't going to be at school for a while, and that was that basically, that I kind of had to go because there was nothing left that I could have done in the UK. And I just remember opening the booklet, and look, they meant well. It was a send off kind of message, and it all came from a good place, but they all said, instead of being like acknowledgement of how difficult that must have been, and we're hoping everything goes okay, and like we can only imagine how difficult this is for you, like genuinely acknowledging the struggle, it was, enjoy America, have the best time, hope you have fun. I wasn't going to fucking Disneyland. I was going for treatment. And I think that's where I felt such a disconnect, truly for the first time, to people my age, and like damn, yeah, you really just don't get it. And that's when I think I just stopped kind of talking or keeping in touch with people my age or actively trying to, because it was just night and day in that my struggles were so big, and everyone has struggles and everyone goes through things. It's not like I was the only one with a problem at my age, but it was just such a big struggle, and it was constant that there was just, yeah, people were worrying about their maths homework and I was worrying about signing consent forms for surgeries where it was like there may be risk of death. Like, it was stuff like that. And that's when, yeah, I just think there was a complete disconnection. And I think people started kind of glamorizing what I was going through and thinking that I was going to America for a hollybobs and not for a surgery where I had one day before I got there. I'd then have my massive surgery and then was so swollen and so unwell for the next 2 weeks while we were there. I then would fly back home to the UK, would be home for about 4 weeks, and then in the next, in those 6 to 8 weeks again, I was back in America doing the same thing. From 2013 to 2017, I did that every 6 to 8 weeks. So that was my childhood from like 8 to 13. And I think, yeah, there was just a real disconnect with like just how difficult things were for me. I don't really think I shared as much as I probably could have about what I was going through. But equally, I just sometimes do think that there's this disconnect of, I think people sometimes want to tell themselves a story that like I'm coping okay or these things are making me stronger, when it's like, no, actually, these things are horrible for me and there's no bright light to the end of them, and there's no like, this is only going to make me stronger and this is only going to make things better. And God, the amount of things that I have heard over the years from like, oh, you're so strong, or like, the universe only gives you things that you can handle, or so many things that I know are not in like a malice intent, but genuinely are so damaging. And I'm sure we've all been there. I'm sure I've said things that have all come from a good place, but have just made things so much worse for someone, whether it's, people grieving or people going through a breakup, because there are certain experiences that unless you experience, you'll never know the right thing to say. And that's okay. I think people are fixers and in life just want to fix everything and fix everyone. So if they don't have like a solution to your problem, they feel very uncomfortable with that because they just don't know how to meet you where you are. They don't know how to sit with you in your grief, in your loss, in your hard, and just be in that with you. And so try and meet you with like, things will be okay, or things will get easier, or like, try and look for the good in this. And it's like, there is no good in this. Stop trying to make me look for some light or brightness to this when it is a incredibly shit situation. And I felt like I was just even more sat at home by myself, where the only people I spoke to were my parents, because people were constantly just trying to fix me and try and tell me something to make things feel better. And the thing is that there's no way that this can be better unless you are taking away my condition or taking away my struggles. There is no solution out of this, and not having solutions make people very uncomfortable because they're not very good at sometimes just being compassionate and just sitting with you in your struggles. The amount of times I've had, friends in the past come and visit me and I've not been in a place where I can seem fine, and then they leave, and I then worry that I've made them feel uncomfortable because I've not been able to put on a smile, and I've not been able to like be resilient or seem okay or happy and cheerful. I'm like on the brink of like not wanting to be here and like really not in a good place, and I've then panicked when they've left and been like, God, they probably think I'm crazy, and I feel so bad that they've come to visit me and I've not been able to ask them how they are, or hold like a conversation bar, like giving them a one-word answer. And I remember this distinctive time that I this was my most recent, like, massive surgery where I was in recovery for 4.5 months. This was a couple of years ago, and I was so severely depressed. It was like my mum didn't want to, like, leave me because she didn't know what I was going to do. And my friend came to visit me, and we were watching a film, and I was just staring into space. I was not even there. There was nothing behind my eyes. I was just so much in a bad place that I couldn't even try and be like, how are you? I just couldn't do it. And I just couldn't paint on a smile. And sometimes you can't do it. You are so tired and you are so exhausted and you're just trying to get through the day that you cannot even try to mask being okay. And yeah, we were watching a film, not really talking very much. And then I messaged her after saying, I'm really sorry that I couldn't seem okay. And if I was off, because I was off. And, I just said, I'm in a really bad place right now, as you probably can tell. And this is a friend that I'd been friends with for like 5 years, and I truly thought was someone that I could confide in. And then she said this sentence, and I was like, okay, remind me to never talk to you about my proper struggles ever again. She said, it's okay, honey, just run a bath and get a takeaway. Like I don't know, had a bad day at work, or I don't know, gone through a bad breakup or something, which even when you're going through a bad breakup, it can be hell. But it's like, no, I've been in recovery for 4.5 months. I'm not getting better. All of my friends had just gone to uni and were in the middle of freshers, had kind of forgotten about me. And she kind of had the audacity to be like, make light of the situation by saying that takeaway and having a bath was going to solve my problems and make my day. And sure, sometimes a takeaway and having a bath does make your day, and it's something that you look forward to, and it's something that I look forward to. But in a time where you're going through so much, for someone to kind of reduce it to like, oh, girlie, just have a takeaway and all will be okay. It's like, no, again, why do you have to meet me with like, do this and all will be okay in the world? Why can't it be, don't worry, I can't imagine how difficult things are for you. I'm here. I will sit with you through this. Instead, I just was then made to feel like, you don't get this. And I know you can't get this, but you're not even trying to get this. And I think people have lost this ability to sometimes see outside of their own lives unless something is affecting them, and therefore is like, think that the easiest thing they can do to just get out of an uncomfortable conversation is like, oh, don't worry, things will be okay, or, can I get you anything? Some flowers, or like, no, the biggest thing you can give me or get me is your time. And sometimes people just don't want to give you their time anymore to truly sit with you in your shit. And I've realized that, I can count on my hand, like my mum, my dad, my brother and my sister, and maybe one of my best friends who are people that I feel like I could genuinely tell them, like, no airs and graces, just how bad the reality of what I'm going through at times is without feeling guilty for it. It's like, you're not seeing the 4-hour waits for a 10-minute appointment, the needle phobia, the PTSD, the quiet panic that like builds up after and before every procedure, the loss of independence, all of these things. And it's really difficult. It is really difficult. And I think a lot of people try and see me for my achievements rather than my struggles. And I don't want people to see me for my struggles. I'm so much more than my condition. And I always say that my condition is like the least interesting thing about me. But equally, it's such a big part that shaped me into who I am. And sometimes when people love to make everything look beautiful when you're going through pain, it can be really difficult and really damaging, I think, when people don't acknowledge just how bad things you're going through are. I think acknowledgement and seeing is the biggest things that you need in life to get through some of the hardest times. Is like acknowledgement, like, yeah, this is really shit. I'm not going to try and change the situation because I can't for you. But I can try and sit with you in it. If you want to watch a film in silence, that's okay. I will sit next to you and watch this film in silence, but just know that I am here. And I feel like people these days just don't do that very well. They can't acknowledge very well, and they can't just be very well. Sometimes we don't want to be fixed because there's no way that our situation can be fixed. So just let me be. Don't try and fix me. Don't try and give me a solution. Don't try and give me some toxic positivity, and just sit with me. And it's in those times that I have found it the most healing, genuinely healing, and the most helpful and useful in a time where it feels like there is no way to get out of this. There is no way to make light of something. Just allowing someone your time and to see them just as they are is the most healing thing that a person can do. And so I think there's this gap between sometimes how something looks and how it feels. And it's, there's this quiet like survival, I think, in that. When I see my friends, I feel guilty sometimes saying, I am going through such a hard time right now, because I don't want to bring the mood down. And sometimes there have been situations where I have felt like, I call them friends. I feel like now I know they're not really friends. In the past, people have not wanted to see me because I'm not my fun self. And it's like, if you really see in your hardest times who, looks out for you, and it's always the people you don't think that will show up. I've always found that, of course, the usual people will show up because you know them and they know you and they see you. But then it's the people that you hope and would think would be there for you, how you hope, don't. And the people that you don't think would be there for you, or you don't expect to, that are. And it's like defining moments of a relationship, I think. How your bad moments, how people react to you in your bad, difficult times. I think it's the same with anything. And of course, I will always make excuses for people and be like, well, they've got their own problems, they've got their own shit going on, they've got their own stuff to contend with. And that is always true. I am always the first person to, justify people's actions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if someone is just not giving you their time when they genuinely don't have anything going on, that is an excuse. And it's just because they just don't want to deal and they want to live in a land where everything is fine and everything is good, then that's not okay. There were so many times after a surgery I had where my friends I'd not left the house in 4.5 months. And my friends would go for drives just cause, when they were leaving the house and they had their lives going on, and they'd go for drives. By the way, these are people I'm not friends with anymore. So in case you're like, Nikki, why the hell are you friends with these people? I'm not friends with them anymore. So you don't need to worry about me. I realized because of this situation that they weren't proper friends. But I'd not left my house in 4.5 months. And my friends were going for drives, knowing how much I was struggling and how I hadn't left the house, and was not thinking, oh, Nikki's not left the house. I'm sure of all the people, she'd want to go for a drive with us and she'd want to get out of the house. And then I'd find out that they were going on these drives and they were doing all of these things, going to each other's houses and not asking me if I'd want to go, because they just didn't want that time to turn into something less exciting and less fun because I couldn't meet them at that point. And I think that is sometimes where relationships really can be make or break with people when you're going through hard times, Things can be unglamorous and repetitive and frustrating and unpredictable. It's not a montage of sad events where you come out the other side a better person for them. It's no romantic drama. It's no, I did this and it made me stronger. It's no diamonds are built under pressure. It's none of this fake quotes and, everything's going to be okay. It isn't that. And so I think if you can take anything out of this, it's just, if you are struggling to be there for someone, whether it's in grief or in a breakup, or maybe they've lost their job or in a chronic illness, whatever it is, and you're struggling to know how to show up for them and how to be there for them, but you are a good friend or a good sibling or co-worker or wherever it may be, and you do genuinely want to be there and you are the exception to the rule, just hear them, see them. Time is the most valuable thing we have. Give them your time and acknowledge them, because sometimes that's all we want is acknowledgement. And yeah, it is linear. It's not that difficult to just see someone and be there for them and show up for them, because often a lot of showing up is the action of showing up and not all the words and like emptiness that comes along with it, you know? So yeah, it's just, I think before you speak and realize that if there isn't a solution to something, sometimes the only solution is compassion. And that is actually what I'm learning from my therapist at the moment, is that like, I'm really hard on myself sometimes. I'm like, why the hell can't I just do this? Why can't I just get on with things? Why do I get so affected by things? And sometimes she says, when there is no answer, the only answer is compassion. And so that is my little thought of the week, is when you catch yourself trying to find a lesson in something painful, give yourself the permission to just feel it first. Don't let other people trying to fix you, trying to kind of speed up your healing process for their own comfort, deter you from being like, no, this is shit. And I'm allowed to feel like this is shit and feel sorry for myself, because you are allowed, especially if it is a genuinely difficult thing you're going through. I mean, look, people do love to turn the smallest things into big things. And then people like that, I really struggle to have compassion for. But when you are going through something and it is a hard day or a hard period or a hard time, I'd say I've had a hard time ever since I was 6. Allow yourself to just give yourself a break. The voice you hear in your head is the one you hear 95% of the time in your day, and you will in life. So if you can meet yourself or others with anything, it would be compassion. So stop glamorizing or trying to put a positive spin on struggle, and just let people be sometimes. Stop trying to heal them. Stop trying to find a way to make everything seem okay when it's just not. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this. I've spoken so much about my condition and about illness, but I wanted to talk a bit about like why suffering has kind of become this aesthetic, and why people kind of do glamorize it sometimes for attention, or try and find a way to fix you because it means that they can move on with their lives and not feel like a bad person for maybe not showing up how they know they should. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. It's not an easy topic, but I hope it reminds you that we can both hold gratitude and grief and strength and exhaustion without needing to make everything look pretty or being okay. But next week, we're going to lighten things up and talk about why I miss being cringe, because that is something that I often ponder about. So until next time, thank you for listening to me ramble, and take care of yourselves and remind yourself to live a little.